from Russia and the CIS countries have the same opportunity where the book has been a bestseller, but I'm not here to sell books. I'm here to help you sell customers and to give you sort of a basic overview of what you need to do in our view of the world to make your startup a success. And I thought it was appropriate, since we have such an international audience this evening, to offer you a presentation I gave just a few weeks ago in Johannesburg, Africa, South Africa, to uh, thousands of entrepreneurs from 180 different countries around the world. And while we don't have 180 today, we have a pretty interesting representation. So welcome, all of you. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope I will be meeting you in Istanbul and other parts of the world soon. So as Barack told you, I've done, at the age of 22, I left a fabulous job, much to the frustration of my middle-class parents, to start my first company, and did 7 of them over 3 decades. And the important thing about this silly math exercise, which doesn't obviously add up, my 7 startups equaled 2 home run big successes, 2 modest successes, and 3 where I really learned how to build a startup. The 3 that no matter how hard I worked, how much of my own and no investors' money I put in, they went DTT, direct to the toilet, the place where you really learn how to build a startup. I went on and made 27 angel investments, 7 IPOs, 6 more direct to the toilet. When you have an IPO, you spend all your time talking about how brilliant you are. When you take 6 months or a year of your own sweat and blood, and in my case, your own money, and you stand at the toilet and say, this is it, and you crumple it all in a ball and flush the toilet, that is when you start to think about, what will I do differently next time? What did I learn from this horrible experience, and what am I not going to do again? And our favorite joke about the Startup Owner's Manual is that it includes 500 stupid startup mistakes made personally by either Steve Blank, Bob Dorf, or in some cases, both of us. And this math matters, the 2 plus 2 minus 3, because according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, every day somewhere in the world, 137,000 startups are launched. Now, these can be a small taco truck, they can be a woman in Africa selling slices of cake in the town square, or they can be Google. But how many of those startups do we remember a few years later? Do we remember 12 of those thousands, or 2% of those thousands? But if you are going to do a startup, and believe me, from my experience traveling the world, in your corners of the world, this is dramatically more challenging, more difficult than it is in the United States in particular, where startups have been an important part of commerce literally since World War II, when Stanford University actually encouraged all its engineers to leave the campus and go out and help small electronics, radar, radio businesses, because we were frankly getting killed, getting our rear ends kicked in World War II. And they wanted to create a marriage between the engineering talent and the commercial talent. But if you are going to create that marriage, you are almost certainly going to invest 20,000 hours or more of your life before you can sit back and say, wow, I did it. And so if you're going to invest that kind of time, 20,000 hours is 80 hours a week, 5 years. Maybe you get Christmas Day off, maybe you get your birthday, or better yet, your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or husband's birthday off. But mostly you are deeply committed if you are going to have any prayer of meaningful success at all. And not everybody has to be Google to be happy and satisfied. You can build a lovely 20, 30, 6-person business that can be challenging and exciting and push you to work hard and do great things, and make you some good money along the way. And most businesses, even including Google and Facebook, first got to some level of sustainability with 6 or 8 or 10 employees. And to me, thinking about that first step as the foundation of your greatness is really important. Don't worry about how great it's going to be someday. Worry about how you're going to get from day one to product market fit, which we'll talk about a little more, to break even, the next critical step, to demonstrating growth and traction that will attract meaningful investment, the next critical step, and then to deploy that investment wisely as you grow your business, in many cases beyond the borders of your home country, because some of your markets may not be big enough to support long-term explosive growth. But it all starts not with the product, not with the idea. It starts with customers. And when you look at thousands of startups, it becomes abundantly clear that the reason most startups fail is not because of a lack of technology, not because of a lack of resources, but a lack of customers. And if there is a single sort of brilliance to Steve Blank's 10 years of work on developing and testing the customer development method before I joined him in 2010 to build out the methodology and the startup owner's manual. If there was one piece of true brilliance in all of Steve's work, it was that you begin not with the software, not with the engineering, not with the product. You begin with the customers, because without customers, we are nothing. And so how do you think in your early days in your startup of getting to that sort of survival level? I teach a course called Survival Math, where you don't think about things like amortization and interest and long-term debt. You think about, how am I going to get from one month to the next, so that I can continue to refine my business, learn from my customers, and start to get it onto a healthy, sustainable track. Because without these pillars, these sort of fundamentals of startup success, you have almost no prayer other than praying for a miracle. And I don't know how well this translates in your language, but you could easily replace the word toast with the word dead. You can't get going here. And the 3 pillars make 3 things happen. They make what you're doing repeatable, scalable, and profitable. Okay? So repeatable. It works in my town. Does it work in the next town as well or better? It works in my country. Does it work in the next country? Scalable. Do people stay with me? Do they refer me to other customers? Am I able to continue this geographic and product expansion onward and onward for the long term? And of course, when you get there, you hopefully are also approaching the 3rd result, profitability. Right? Profitability takes several forms. One is as simple as, I'm making a living, I'm happy, I don't work in a cubicle in a bank, I am my own boss, I'm doing my own thing, doing something I love. Many of you, I believe, are social entrepreneurs working to improve life in your country or for underserved populations in your country, whether they're immigrants or, veterans or young children or troubled children. Your accomplishments are measured in ways other than cash in the bank. And the third, and I think something that entrepreneurs forget far too often, finding the business you're going to start is not really very different than falling in love. If you think about, gee, I need to start a business, and trust me, I've made this mistake twice in my life. Are you in a hurry to start a business? Or are you going to do something that's exciting to you, that's, spiritually rewarding and challenging and interesting? Because if it's not, you are going to have a very long, difficult existence because startups never go straight up like a rocket. You're going to have dark days. You're going to have difficult days. You're going to be lonely as the founder because you can't talk to your employees about how badly things are going. You have to very isolated, very alone, and you need people like those on this call who you can share your issues and challenges with. But if you think about dating, whether you're a man or a woman, uh, you want to meet a lot of men or women before you decide this is the one I want to live with or make children with and build a family with. Similarly, with a startup, too many of the entrepreneurs I see are in a hurry to be a founder, to be a CEO, to be able to say, I have my own business. Take your time, look around a lot, do a lot of homework before you make that 20,000-hour commitment, because once you've made it, you are truly committed. You're committed to investors if you have them. You're committed sort of spiritually, you're committed to co-founders or employees, and you want to be sure that even when things aren't going well, you're still having fun, proud of what you're doing, working to accomplish something, whether measured in dollars or, social good. So think hard, don't rush. And one of the biggest challenges with the lean startup customer development method, entrepreneurs by their nature are almost always in a hurry. This takes time. To build a great company, you need a great foundation. Every entrepreneur wants to get to the point as quickly as they can where they run out and say, hey, look at my great new thing. Will you buy this thing? Get feedback. Why not spend time first understanding who the customer is, what they want to buy from you, what other products they're going to consider along the way? And so there are sort of three foundations or pillars to deliver this repeatable, scalable, profitable result. And I want to walk through them relatively quickly to give you a sense of it, but mostly to get to the point where we do probably the most important thing in this webinar, and that is talk about what you want to talk about. So we will, I'm going to talk for a little while, and then we're going to open up the chat room and fire away with your questions, and we'll talk about whatever's on your mind. So number one, businesses, particularly B2B businesses, succeed because they're solving a serious, painful, ugly, frequent, expensive problem. Right? Businesses don't buy things because they're nice to have. They don't buy things because you're a great salesperson. They spend money to solve problems. Similarly, consumers often spend money to solve problems, but sometimes they have needs to fill. whether it's social needs, or they want to lose weight, or they want to be more beautiful, or be more educated. But again, the key here is, where are you on their priority list? If the solution you are going to build is not in the top 5 on their priority list, somewhere after food and shelter and clothing and love, somewhere real close to that, then what you're learning is, maybe there's not a market for what. Maybe I have to rephrase it, reframe it, right? Because what you're doing by testing the problem first is determining whether or not there's a serious market opportunity for your business. First time you go out, you're looking for whether customers tell you that there is an endless opportunity, that you are solving a problem that they have to resolve, and eventually you're going to check out whether or not your solution is really different. Customer discovery gives you the key to solving this, okay? Because number one, what we think and what our team members think doesn't really matter. What our investors think, particularly once they've written the check, doesn't really matter. What I think, or Barack, or Steve Blank thinks, or what your favorite professor thinks doesn't really matter. Success is defined by the customer, not the marketer. And so the sort of marching order of the Startup Owner's Manual, which you'll see on the very first page in large type, is get out of the building, because there are no customers in your building. Customers are in Starbucks, or in retail stores, or online, and you need to get face to face with them one at a time to discover this kind of feedback and get their sort of sense of whether you're solving a real problem or not, and where they put the problem you're solving on their list of priorities. Now, the way we recommend you do this is you literally go to places where you can get face to face with customers. People who are starting pet care businesses go to parks and walk up to people with dogs and say, hey, can I talk to you a minute about your dog and how you take care of him? People who want to talk to consumers at large go to Starbucks. People who want to talk to mothers go to playgrounds. And the first step in customer discovery, which we call problem discovery, you do not talk about your company or your product at all. And again, as I said, entrepreneurs hate this because it's not it's not selling, it's thinking, it's learning. But that learning is so important as a foundation of how you're going to spend the next 5 or 20, hopefully, years of your life. So why not, even if you've already launched, do this exercise. Go talk to 10 or 12 or 20 customers about the problem you're solving. So if you have a new accounts receivable software package, go talk to people in businesses in finance about how serious a problem it is to collect from their customers, and the issues, challenges, and problems of their existing solution. But where is this on your list? Some of the finance people will tell you, every morning, first thing, before I've had my first cup of coffee, the boss is in my office saying, how much did we collect yesterday? So every night when I've had a bad day at the office, I lose sleep over knowing I'm not going to make my boss happy with tomorrow's number. So really understanding where your problem fits in the universe is foundational to whether your solution to that problem is any good or not. And it's mostly critical because if not enough people have the problem, you probably don't have a market. Second, when you do these interviews, do not talk to anybody you know, no friends, no family, and do not hint at the solution or the answer to the question, sort of the way some lawyers sometimes will sort of try to push the jury in one direction or another in a trial. In other words, don't ask them, do you have a problem collecting your accounts receivable? Right? Give them 3 or 4 or 5 problems to choose from and ask them to put them in priority order for you. And then say, gee, why did collecting money from my customers come out at the bottom? Well, all our customers pay in advance or we don't ship. Well, maybe it's not a problem for that person. You want to be very careful not to give people the answer you want. And you know that whether you show the best or worst product ever invented to your mother or your father or your uncle or your boyfriend, girlfriend, roommate, they're going to give you good feedback because they know that that's what you want. And it's not what you want. You want honest feedback so that you can learn from it and adjust based on that learning to change the product, change the features, change the way you explain it, change the people you sell it to. There are so many ways to refine your business, particularly if you do this early in the life of the business, when you have time to actually adjust the physical or digital product along the way. And so you ask the customers to prioritize for you what they want the product to do. One of the best examples of this came from a company I suspect most of you know, Dropbox, where on the homepage of Dropbox, and they still do this occasionally today, there's a little box that says, tell us what to do next. Here are the 5 features we're thinking about building. We'd like to know which one is most valuable to you. And so their customer base, which is huge, helps to drive the development plan for the software engineers by saying, gee, I love my Dropbox. I use it all the time, but I'd really like it to do this or like it to do that. So letting the customers tell you what to do in every aspect of your business really is the heart of customer discovery. Onward. Let's take a quick example of how you think about this, right? You're starting a business to bring clean water to a town. When you go out and talk to people, don't ask them if they want clean water. Ask them instead to tell you the 5 biggest problems they see facing the town. And then ask them to prioritize them. And if water is a low priority, find out why they think that. Is it a low priority for everyone, or is it a low priority for them because they have a big, deep well in their backyard? If they made fire safety number 1 and water number 2 or 4 or 5, again, talk about how did you come to these conclusions? Is there anything that would make water a greater priority other than something obvious like a drought? So again, you are letting the customer steer the conversation. You are not talking about your product. You're talking only about the problem or need that your product will solve, okay? When you find out that the problem isn't a priority for that customer, you may have been doing it wrong and you may need to go and do it again, okay? Did you explain the problem clearly? Did you talk to people who worry about this sort of thing? Kids probably don't worry about, water as much as particularly the mothers do. Sales executives don't worry about, collecting cash from customers the way the finance people or the CEO or the CFO might. So you want to be sure that as you go through this process, you are moving closer and closer to speaking with the right people about the problem you're solving, to get the perspective on your problem from those who might experience it or worry about it. Sometimes the problem you are proposing to solve is seen as almost unsolvable. If you are going to bring about peace, or you're going to eliminate air pollution, or something ridiculously huge, um, you may turn people off. You may not get positive feedback just because they don't see it as a possibility. The other thing that happens is, if you're talking about clean water, if there had just been a monsoon or heavy rains the last week or two, this problem may have been demoted sort of along the way. When you find that people don't agree that you're solving that important, expensive problem, reframe the positioning of the product. Refocus your interviews on different people. Try it again. Go out and do 6 more, or split up your team and do 3 or 4 interviews each team member. Come back to a conference room and a whiteboard. See what you learned. See if you learned enough about what you need to change. Are you talking to the wrong people? Are you promoting it the wrong way, discussing it the wrong way? And then go out and do it again. So that's sort of step one, identifying the problem. Now, if you have found that you have found a huge problem, now you got to stop applauding yourself and think instead of, well, gee, I'm probably not the only person on earth to have found this problem, and there are probably other people working. So you go out and you do a thorough competitive analysis. You go to retail stores that might sell your product. You go to online e-commerce sites that might sell it. You go to trade fairs if they exist in the category, and you spend a day or 2 days on Google, not looking at the first few results, but going page after page through the results, because maybe on page 7 of the search results, you're going to see, big company X tried to do this last year and found that everybody thought this ought to be free. Nobody was willing to pay for it, so they wrote off their $1 million investment and shut their doors. That would be very helpful learning for you if you're just starting out to solve the same problem. And how do you then go back and adjust your value proposition, your offering, to distinguish it from other solutions along the way? So again, I'm sort of going through what is often a half a day's discussion with back and forth and examples, which we'll get to soon, about trying to use this feedback from customers to make sure that when you've looked at the competitors, you have reanalyzed your own business to be able to explain to anyone why you're different, why you're better than those on the left-hand side, and faster than those on the right-hand side, and cheaper than those in box 3. How do you get your value proposition, your business, to stand out from the competitive crowd? Okay? Because what you're really trying to do is pillar number 2. Once you have found who the customer is, that they have a problem, and that you have an interesting solution, you've used your customers to guide your business product market fit. What is product market fit? In a sentence, it's seeing a very clear match between your value proposition. Value proposition, simply, why should somebody give you money instead of one of your competitors? What's better, different, more valuable about your solution than the others? So you match that value proposition to your customer target. In other words, I know that people who have this job title or live in this kind of city or building or environment have expressed to me that they respect, appreciate, and need my product and like its value proposition. Now go out and finally start to talk about the product itself and find your way to some predictable, consistent rate of enthusiasm. In other words, I show it to 10 people and 3 of them are all excited and ready to buy. 30% would be a fabulous response rate. Um, if you're selling, private jets, 1/100th of 1% would be a fabulous response rate because you can afford to make thousands of sales calls to sell a brand new $30 million Learjet. But you have to find the right balance. And for example, many entrepreneurs doing smartphone apps or web commerce apps don't realize how many thousands and thousands of matches they have to make in order to build a successful business over time. Sure, you can get your first 20 or 50 customers by bugging your friends or your coworkers or your former colleagues. But remember those 3 words: repeatable. Right? You run out of friends, no matter how charming, friendly, or handsome or beautiful you are, you're going to run out of friends. I guarantee it. So how are you going to make this repeatable beyond people you know? Scalable. How are you going to get it, you know, to be of interest to people beyond your own geography or beyond your own network? So finding and proving to yourself that you found that match is a critical step to take before you launch, before you start spending money and time trying to sell something when you don't know exactly what the customer looks like. You don't know what it is that will convince him or her to buy from you. You might as well go fishing in the jungle where there's no water, because the likelihood of you finding customers who resonate with that value proposition from the greater population is often very close to zero. So you need to understand which customers to focus on. How do you focus on them? What do they read? What, events do they attend? What blogs do they follow? So that they can give you a sort of guideline or a path to product market fit, to knowing when I see you know, you know, a person who looks like this with a job like that, with this number of years of experience in a big city, that's my prospect. And I know that when I find 10 of them, I'm going to come back with 2 orders. So I can focus my marketing, make it much more efficient, and begin to see some kind of predictability in the future of my startup. So you also have to understand who the buyer is. Is the buyer that accounting clerk who's in charge of collecting the money from customers, or is it the head of finance or the chief financial officer, or sometimes in a smaller business, it's the CEO? So it's not just finding people who like my product, it's finding the person who is empowered to actually write the check or put down the credit card and buy it. People who are doing kid-oriented products often like to forget that, you know, kids have to go to mom and dad for the money. Lower level employees in companies have to go someplace for the money. So making sure you understand who the buyer is part of this exploration, this customer discovery process. Well, gee, if you liked my accounting software, and it were $200, would you be able to buy it, or do you have to go see somebody else to get it approved? Once you understand that, then you want to understand, does my value proposition excite you? You've told me that in this industry, collecting money is a top priority problem. Well, does our solution of doing it with baseball bats, machine guns, and guerrilla warriors, that usually gets the money collected pretty quickly. Does that resonate with you? Is that something your company would like to do? And again, can I do this at a predictable rate of speed? 2 out of 10, as I said, would be terrific. More than that, even better. So again, you want to test this twice, because maybe your first 10 you were more energetic, or maybe the weather was better, or it was worse, or it was a Friday and nobody really wanted to pay attention. So if you hit a success the first time, I encourage startups to do it a second time to make sure that it wasn't an exception. And most of the time, you're going to find the first time you do this, it's not a match. You haven't found product market fit, because finding it is probably the most critical and single element of your potential success as a business. And so when it's not, you've got to try again. You've got to change something. Maybe you make the product or service smaller. Maybe you make it bigger. Maybe you're talking to the wrong customers. Maybe you should be starting in a single city rather than the whole world or the whole country, in order to be able to sell it face to face for a while until you figure out what sales activities work. Maybe you're presenting the features and benefits the wrong way, and you should just change the way you pitch. Maybe you should change the way you price. With some expensive products, very often you'll run into customers who say, well, that's really nice, but I have no budget for, capital equipment. Simple solution to that: find a leasing company partner and say, oh, you don't have to buy it. You can, lease it over years. But spending the time and energy in the early days of your startup to make sure you've got product market fit right is critical to your success, right? I'm going to, in the interest of time, right, move on to, right, getting customers, the third sort of pillar, right? First, remember that everything about customer acquisition is totally testable. You can test whether it's AdWords or Facebook posts or email blasts or handing out literature on street corners. Test it now. Don't wait for the product to be complete, to be ready to sell. What you're looking for is, does this method of reaching out to customers get customers interested? You can even build a website where there's a click to buy page months before you have, completed your product. Because what you're looking for is, will anybody click on buy? And what percentage of people, who come to my website will click on the buy button? And when they do, don't take their money because you don't have a product yet. Send them a note. Thank you for clicking. We're not quite ready. If you'd like to order it now for delivery in September, click here. Or if you prefer, we will reach out to you in September and we will give you a 20% discount for, expressing your interest now. And you can test lots of these different techniques. Think of it as a scientist with 10 hamster or rat cages. Each one's got a little wheel and a little rat and some cheese and some water. And you feed the first rat email marketing, the second one social media, the third one AdWords, the fourth one flyers on street corners. And you try all of these, again, long before you've launched your business. And you see which rats are racing around the wheel in the morning, and which ones are dead. And the dead ones, you throw them out, you put a new rat in, and you test something else. Because if you can't get customer acquisition right and make it affordable, the likelihood of your success is almost zero, which unfortunately for most startups, particularly in your regions of the world, zero is also roughly the first advertising budget you're going to be able to afford. So testing these things, measuring the results, and optimizing the results with, if email seems to be working a little bit, try new headlines, try different offers, try more emails, try trading lists with other companies. You're constantly in a sort of routine of testing the program, measuring the result, going back and trying to optimize it, and wherever humanly possible, focusing on things you can do at no cost, right? You want to think about how much you can spend both early and later. Try not to spend anything or very little at first. You get better at this over time, but you will not get better at reducing the cost of AdWords. AdWords are a challenge to deliver customers affordably unless you're selling more expensive products. If you are selling smartphone downloads, it's almost certain that you'll spend more money buying the customer than you'll receive from the App Store after they take their 30% cut and so forth. You want to be monitoring from the first day the cost CPA, cost per acquisition. How much did it cost me last week to get a customer? How am I going to reduce that number even by a very few percentage points next week? And what am I going to do after that? And one of the keys to this, which we won't talk about today, is what's called A/B testing, where you test email message 1 to half the audience and email message 2 to the other half. And depending on which one does better, you save the better one, throw away the other one, and create a new one to try to beat your latest most successful offer. Sometimes, this is going to take too long. I want to get to questions. So the kinds of things to test, don't forget sort of non-sexy, non-digital things like flyers and banners and posters and handing out things in shopping centers, getting press articles about your business, making speeches about the subject the problem you're solving and ways to solve it. Again, you're trying to work your way toward a repeatable, scalable, profitable marketing activity. Right? So, to recap, the 3 pillars, the 3 critical things. 1, be sure expensive, painful, frequent problem. 2, find product market fit. Do not move ahead without it. And 3, long before you launch, begin testing ways you're going to get your customers and try to make sure when the product is ready, you have a reasonably affordable way to get customer after customer going forward. And just before I wind up, there is one more pillar. Rock and your wonderful mentors and coaches all over the region can teach you the tools, the technology, the marketing skills, and so forth. But the thing we can't teach you is passion, tenacity. I'm never going to give up. If you don't have that, my from the heart advice is don't start. Now, whatever your religion may be, for this moment, believe in Jesus, not the real Jesus, this Jesus. This is, on the right is the first offices of Jesus Martinez, a terrific Mexican entrepreneur who had a wonderful job and a little part-time business out of this shack in Mexico City, making and delivering flower arrangements to Mexico City. And he worked nights and weekends on it because he had a really good job. What is this? Benjamin says, Jesus is the hope for the last man in the street to make it. Well, this is not Jesus. This is Jesus Martinez. And he went home to his wife and his new baby and his new mortgage. And he said, honey, I can't stay at my job. I have the feeling that my flower business can explode, but I need to spend all my time on it. And so I want to take the risk, quit this very good job that makes us very comfortable, and work around the clock in my flower business. Today, Jesus delivers 8,000 beautiful floral bouquets all over Mexico in a multi-million dollar, very profitable business. He is so vertically integrated that he now has ultra modern facilities instead of this rather unusual place. He owns his own trucks, he grows his own flowers, and he has built himself a repeatable, scalable, profitable business that is delivering floral arrangements every day all over Mexico for Envia Flores, his company, and for many of the US companies trying to deliver flowers in Mexico as well. So remember, if you get one thing out of our time together today, don't focus on being in a hurry. Focus on making your startup great. Great defined as repeatable, scalable, and profitable. So that's the story. It's the very short version of how to think about using lean startup customer development method to build a truly great business. And so I'm going to take a question here from Fidel Lancheray Damba Ngolo, whose name I probably just destroyed, so with apologies for that. Can a startup be considered a traditional business, or must it contain a different perspective? Well, the faster route to success is clearly to find, a reason to stand out from the crowd, to have what has been called in the US a unique selling proposition, a reason people should be coming to you instead of competition, and so forth. So at the beginning, when you're thinking of founding your startup, you really want to think about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. And there is no reason that the world can't afford and support lots more restaurants or limousine services or pizza parlors. But you want to always be looking for something that can distinguish your business from the others. How do you calculate the runway for a startup? A question from Benjamin Omike. How do you calculate the runway to be launched? Well, I wrote a whole long chapter about that in the Startup Owner's Manual, but I think there are a couple things you have to think about. Number one, how many months will it take you until you can accept your first money from customers? Is that 2 months, 3 months? Sometimes if it's complex enterprise software, it can be a year or two. So question one, how long is it going to take? Question two, is it interesting enough to investors to, support that period with no income? If not, can you survive? Can you live in your parents' basement? Can you borrow some money from friends? Can you do this by, giving people equity rather than cash to help you in your quest? And then the next step. So once you know I need, let's say, $100,000 for the next 6 months. Where's that going to come from? Um, but there's no simple way to calculate this. You really have to look at uh, how long can I go typically without a salary or with a very, very small salary. Right? Jesus, our Mexican entrepreneur, took no salary out of his business for the first year because he knew he could go a year living on savings and he wanted to put every dollar he could um, into his business. Um, let's see. When I've met a client and introduced, this is from Rana Abisudu. Met a client, introduced my service. He likes the service we provide, but we're still a new portfolio. How can you convince the client to try our service? Really, there's only one way. Well, there's two ways. One is charm and, promises. The worst thing you can do is say, I will do it for free for a while or a month or two or whatever. And then if you like it, you pay. Because now the client has no investment in your success working for them. The best way to do this is to get 2 or 3 satisfied, ecstatic, happy customers, your first customers who either are cheap, paying very little, or you're working for them for nothing, to begin to build your reputation. And now you have what we call referenceable clients. Well, the best way I can convince you to use my service is to get you on the phone with somebody I just helped who will tell you that I gave them great work, good value, good product, whatever. And from personal experience, I will tell you about a year and a half into my 7th and by far most successful business, a $50 million business with 500 employees around the world. We did just this in the early days. We took 2 or 3 small customers where we knew we could be successful, where we worried more about their participation and cooperation than we worried about the fee they would pay us. And we worked night and day to make sure they were ecstatically happy. A few months later, I was on the phone with a big bank in Ohio called Bank One. And basically, the guy was sitting on the contract for weeks, and I really wanted to get him to sign. So we're on a phone call, and he said, basically, he didn't say it this way, but he was really saying, how do I know if you guys are any good? Okay. He said, well, we are working today for Charles Schwab and American Airlines and Pitney Bowes and Isuzu Motors and so on and so on. Do you think that there are any problems in our industry, the CRM industry, that we haven't seen and dealt with before? And the guy said right then, that's what I needed to hear. I'll sign the contract and send it back right away. Okay? So it's building credibility. You can't do this with PowerPoint. You can't do this with great sales talk. You have to do it by having proof of your ability and so forth. Let's see. Moving right along. If the priority at the moment is low, this is from IO, probably due to education, should you try to educate your customer? You almost always have that obligation, particularly in a newer sort of market space, to make sure that customers are aware of the issues, the solutions, and so forth, and partly to position yourself as an expert, knowledgeable in that field, so that you're building a community around the problem you're solving and positioning yourself as the expert, experienced in solving that problem. The more you can do that, and importantly, you can do that months and months before you're ready to launch the business, right? so that by the time you are ready to launch, you have this sort of basically social media conversation going on with hundreds of people who are feeling the pain of the problem you are about to solve. So you're sort of preconditioning the audience the way an athlete would train for a race by getting them to talk about solutions, talk about needs, talk about issues, and so forth. Fidel asked a question about considering an R&D based startup that will involve designing a new device. Can an investor take the risk? It takes a very bold investor to take that kind of a risk, and they usually take it based on the experience or the previous successes of the startup team. I think a very important thing you should all be aware of is in the earliest days of soliciting investor funds, the newer your business is, in other words, if it's still an idea or it's even a few months old, really the investor isn't betting on the business. They're betting on you. They're betting on your determination, your energy, your education, your past experience, because there's nothing for them to analyze about how well the business is doing or not doing. You don't have any revenue to look at. You don't have any customers for them to meet with. And so it's extremely difficult to find investors backing an idea where the where the outcome is so uncertain. So let's see, moving right along. I have a question for my product launch. For my product launch soon. This is Devijay Madam. For my product launch soon, how would you suggest us to do product market fit? I would suggest you do just what we outlined. You can find lots of information. Type product market fit into Google. You'll find videos and so forth. If you go to Udacity, UDACITY.com, you will find a 9-part online free lecture series by Steve Blank on each of the steps on your way to product market fit. But if you're getting ready to launch soon, you should be working on this right now, even if it means your product development slows down a little bit. Because if you don't know who your customers are, who cares whether your product is complete at this point or not? Sorry, Raphael, I missed your question. They're coming in quite quickly, which hopefully means I've helped you a bunch. Would I advise a startup to go for a loan to start? Well, first of all, it's extremely difficult and time-consuming to get a loan. Most people will lend to you when it's a startup, right? You have no revenue or profit history. You have no or very little money in the bank. So the likelihood of lending the business money is truly almost zero. And so you really are, in most cases, talking about what we call friends and family money. Do you have a wealthy uncle or brother or just one sec there. Or a friend who will lend you some money in exchange for what is usually a a very high interest rate, and comes with giving that investor some equity to encourage them to do it. So if you're launching in 3 months on a trial basis, I would be getting to work at this sort of right now. Quick tips and hacks for onboarding new customers to a SaaS product. Okay, that's a frequent challenge where, yeah, you can get somebody to either take the free month or to even sign up and pay, but they're not going to pay for very long if they're not getting use out of it. And so the way to think about whether it's a SaaS product or an e-commerce solution, you need to get them more educated and coming back often. So for software products, webinars, seminars, introductory videos on how to use the product. Monitor their usage. Hey, Bob, we noticed you signed up for our product, 3 weeks ago, and we appreciate your business, but don't you want to use it? Can we get on the phone with you and walk you through it? Can we send you a 30-minute get started video that will help you? It's your obligation to drive your customers' success with the product, not the customer's obligation to use it or love it or anything like that. And so you really can't count on customers to do more than click the buy button, and it's your job to activate them, to energize them. And the other thing I think you want to be doing is monitoring your customers' use. Are they logging on, once a month for 5 minutes or once a day for an hour? And the less they're logging on, the more ambitious, once they're logging on, the more ambitious you are about staying in touch with them and getting them using it more, the more successful you're like to be. Yeah, so I mean, that again is a very short answer for a very complicated question, but I think you have to take ownership of the customer's success. At least, I mean, you have to do it forever, but in the first few months, there's nothing more critical. I'm working with a startup now based in Sofia, Bulgaria, where there are some product problems. So every time a product arrives in the customer's house, somebody calls them and says, "Hi, I'd like to walk you through it and get you started." Right? We're not going to do that forever. We can't possibly afford to do it forever. But for now, to improve the customer experience and make sure there aren't horrible things about us on social media, there's no other logical way we can find. Question from Mohammed Hassan. Humbly waiting for my answer. I'm flattered, Mohammed, and I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can with this sort of massive pile of questions. Importing a business idea from another country is a great way to launch a startup. If you're in a CIS country or an African country or anywhere, in Turkey, there are thousands of good business ideas to choose from in the United States, in Western Europe, in neighboring countries. Those people have figured out some of the product market fit already. They've figured out what to say, what it ought to look like. So yes, it's a great source of ideas. And when you see something successful, make sure you've thought through whether it's adaptable to the culture and the sort of business behavior of people in your country, right? In some of your countries, people will never do a transaction online using a credit card. So if you're thinking of an e-commerce business, you have to solve, um, you know, the problem of how you're going to get paid in that country. So I have a question from Raphael Akogo. Would I advise a startup to go for a loan to start? I would not suggest that you waste much time with banks. Some government agencies will lend money to startups. There are some crowdfunding kinds of solutions in some markets. So take a look at that. But most of the time, unless you have a truly brilliant breakthrough idea, getting commercial investment, whether it's a loan or an investment in the early days, is a struggle that will distract you, take all of your time, um, and not likely to be successful. I have a question about, in a tech startup marketplace, how much would be an ideal cost for an MVP? It's almost an impossible question to answer. In Steve Blank's last most successful startup, the MVP cost several $1,000,000. If you're doing something simpler, it could be, a few $100,000. Sometimes an MVP can actually be free because the founders are doing the coding and the designing. And remember that an MVP, or a minimum viable product, is not necessarily functional. It's not necessarily beautiful. What you're trying to communicate is, here are the kinds of things that this product will do. Here are some of the features of the software or the website or whatever. The most famous MVP in history was probably yahoo.com, where the homepage, the initial homepage of Yahoo, was simply a list of websites, and it was David Philo and Jerry Yang. It was David and Jerry's favorite websites for news, for sports, for recipes. It was basically a list of links to other websites. That was the MVP. Turned into a business worth many billions of dollars, worth many billions more a few years ago than it is today, but we would all be very happy from there. Ayo, good question. After I get product market fit, what's the next milestone? The next milestone is the third pillar. How do I get customers at a price I can afford? Again, ideally weeks or months before you're ready to launch, because your financial resources are going to be critical. They're going to be, you got to cherish every dollar. So, all right, I've been told to keep this to about an hour and 15 minutes. So I think I'm going to take one more question. As a young investor, how do I secure and keep my customers, even though they do not really prefer your products? That's a difficult question, Santo. I have no real idea other than talk to them. What they must like something. Maybe they like you, or that you deliver it to them, or that you find out what they love and do more of that. Find out if they have friends who value things the same way they do and might be potential customers for you as well. And so with that, I think you're all hear the cocktail glasses clinking in the background. I think some of them are in a lovely place in Istanbul, about to have a social hour. And so I going to never stand in the way in between an entrepreneur and a bartender. It's one of my first rules. And so I wish you all the best of luck and a lovely evening. And I thank you so much for your enthusiastic participation. And I hope to see you in Istanbul soon.
Bob, thank you very much for the awesome webinar. I think it's a great value for the entrepreneurs who have attended your webinar from different parts of the world. Thank you very much for attending this kindly 1 hour.
Thank you. Thank you all, and have a great night.
You too. Bye bye.